Hello, everyone, and welcome again back to our broadcast of Passion and Hard Work on the Cyber Risk Ready channel. During our show, we aim to foster a supportive community where passion and hard work and guidance help individuals unlock their full potential. So today we're going to be talking more about information security certifications. And so with me, I've got my co-host, Brian O'Hara. And so Brian is a highly experienced, highly certified individual. So we're excited to have him on the show. And then my background information as well, a little bit there. Brian, let's go ahead and start off with a little bit of discussion about the certifications that maybe an entry-level individual might want to get. So, trying to understand, all the different frameworks, I guess, that are out there and that kind of thing. So, what's your views on where someone should actually start?
That's a big question. You might want to flash real quickly those three screens with the certifications on them so that people know the organizations we're talking about. But
Sure.
primarily, we're talking
Bring
about
those up real quick.
ISC squared, ISC squared, ISACA, and CompTIA. And also what's the next one, Tom?
SANS is the other one,
SANS. Yeah, SANS. Excuse me. Those are the major certification bodies around the state. Just to give you a little background, Tom and I were talking about this the other day. ISC squared actually was the brainchild of the Information Systems Security Association, ISSA, back in the early 80s, when they decided that at that time that everyone was pursuing some type of security certification, that they decided to spin that off into another organization, which is ISC squared. So that there wasn't a conflict of interest between membership and certifications. They felt early on that those two functions should be completely separated organizationally. And so that's how ISC squared came about. The other organizations have come out just simply as a demand in the industries have grown for some type of both entry and master level certifications, if that's a term we can use today. I'd like to go back and start, I guess we'll start with the ISC squared stuff. So in the past, these have been repositories of master level certifications. The CISSP was the gold standard for years and years, but both the CCSP and the CCSP and the CISSP for that matter. Let's just leave it at those two for now. Those are what I call master level security certifications. Those both require a minimum of 5 years of supervised leadership in a security role, with the cloud one in particular, with cloud security. The only caveat to that is if you already have a CISSP, last I checked, ISC squared was still accepting that as your 5 years experience for the cloud security certification, so that you could you immediately, if you pass the exam, you immediately got your certification. But all the rest have some type of time commitment of managed experience. Typically, those come from the old school of thought of 10,000 hours or 5 years of supervised work. The CISSP requires 5 years. The ISACA CISA requires 5 years. I'm not sure what the SANS certifications require. I think those are pretty much course based, but most of them have some type. The senior levels have some type of supervised experience requirement. I don't know about the junior level security certification so much. The SSCP, for instance, the IC squared security administrator, doesn't necessarily require any training or any supervised experience in the background. However, if you take the SSCP and pass the exam, once you get your 5 year, I believe this is still true. Once you've gotten your 5 years, you immediately get grandfathered in and get your CISSP certification. That may have changed recently, but I think it's pretty much still the same, isn't it, Tom? You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I think that's right. Brian, you've got a pretty extensive history with these different certification bodies. And especially as it relates to ISC squared,
Mhm.
some of that original material, you helped co-author, write, and edit. Can you tell us a little bit about your background on that?
Sure. Well, not the original stuff. The original stuff was the domain of Sean Harris, who, may she rest in peace, left us a number of years ago. Sean, if you want to bring up maybe a picture of the gold standard book, Tom, I know you've got a copy there in
I
your
do have a
library
copy of it.
of
Uh,
Sean's book. This
actually,
was forever the gold standard. That's about a 900 or 1,000 page textbook that's just
yep.
crammed full of security stuff. You had to know that cover to cover to get your CISSP. Um, that's no longer the case, and with her having passed away, I believe it was around 2005 or 6, I don't remember exactly.
Mhm.
Um, a new set of books came out on the market, and a company called Wiley Publishing has taken over most of the publishing because ISC Squared didn't want to get into the publishing business. So what they've done is they've hired contractors, much like myself. I was the technical editor. If you can bring that back up again, Tom, I was both the technical editor on the SSCP um, and the CISSP books several iterations ago. They tend to review these with new authors every couple of years, and then co-authored the CCSP with my co-author Ben. Um, excuse me. So basically, what they do is they give you a set of the standards and say, "This is what we want you to write." And our job was to take that and translate it into usable information for students to be able to read through, do exercises, give examples, charts, graphs, all that kind of stuff, so that they'd understand the material. Whereas ISC or excuse me, ISACA takes a different approach. If you want to bring their slide up there, Tom, ISACA has what I have found a really fascinating and unique approach in that they use um, content experts or subject matter experts from all over the world. The CISA manual Tom and I were looking at earlier, I believe if you open it up and you look at the authors, you'll find a list of at least 25, if not 30, most of whom are PhDs from all over the world, who have written those training materials, edited those training materials, and continually update those training materials to stay current with current procedures and operational changes. So it's a very different approach. They they maintain a membership base, unlike ISC Square. ISC Square, that's another conversation. But ISACA has chapters, and those member chapters are designed to help you maintain your certifications and get your certifications. So, for instance, every time you attend an ISACA meeting, you obtain continuing ed credits for whatever training occurs at that particular meeting. ISACA chapters are widely known for providing lengthy ongoing test prep exam courses as well as ongoing continuing ed coursework in all of their different areas. The other thing is that ISACA, ISC Squared's background and history is really specifically security, where ISACA's background in the early days was almost specifically audit oriented. If you wanted to be a bank auditor, if you wanted to do manufacturing, that kind of stuff, healthcare wasn't quite such an issue in those days prior to HIPAA. ISACA CISA is what you wanted to go after.
Yeah.
As those organizations began to grow, they developed more and more certifications, just like if you go back to the IC squared, you'll see there are 10 or 12 now. Back in the day, there were literally three, the
Yeah.
SSCP, the CISSP. Well, actually, there were just two. There was the SSCP and the CISSP. That was it for decades.
Yeah.
ISACA was the same way, and they had their CISA certification, their CGIT, and then came along the security management, et cetera. So the number of subspecialties has expanded, and this goes back to the conversation we had last week, where I think young up and comers need to start early on trying to find their way through this labyrinth of subspecialties in security and audit in the security and audit world, because there's so many, as you can see from ISC certification. Now you can get your certifications in security software development. Now, that's different than software development. That's security software development.
Right.
You
Sure.
can get it in security architecture. You can get it in security management. They've even got their own governance, risk, and compliance certification out, just like ISACA. So you can see the competition growing between the certification bodies. Um, and I suspect it'll probably continue to grow. AI hasn't even hit these yet. Certification bodies tend to typically stay a little bit behind the curve because it takes them a while to figure out, okay, well, what would a certification in artificial intelligence look like? Who would provide that? Who's most suited in the business to provide those kinds of trainings and certifications? So that give you a background.
It does, yeah. I've always found it interesting, at least from the stuff that I've been involved with from a certification standpoint, is having a balance between ISC squared certs and ISACA certs. Getting the best of kind of both worlds as far as just the exposure of material and how those influence and have influenced and continue to influence my career. Where you mentioned something the other day, as we were kind of talking through some of this material, where ISC Square is more, technical, more hands-on, at least initially, is kind of really what it used to be, and ISACA is more programmatic in
Yeah,
their
I
approach.
think the way I described it was ISC squared is how to or excuse me, ISC squared is more about. So when you take your CISSP leadership, you have to know about a lot of security things. When you work with ISACA, you learn how to do those things. So, for instance, you learn all the steps in conducting an audit, an IT audit. You learn how to go through those steps, and those are you're required to understand those in order to pass your exams. The SAN certifications are what I call really down in the weeds stuff. I mean, if you want to learn how to rip apart Palo Alto firewall, they're going to have a course. They're going to have a course on it. If you want to learn how to write Python scripting to manage your network infrastructure of 7,000 switches, that's where you want to go for training. That's really down in the weeds stuff. But if you want to learn about cloud security, you want to go with ISC Squared. If you want to learn how cloud security is implemented, one we haven't brought up here, the Cloud Security Alliance also has some certifications in cloud
Oh,
security.
right, yeah.
CompTIA has probably the best intro level coursing. We haven't shown the CompTIA ticket up here yet. If you want to maybe slide over to that one, Tom.
Yeah,
CompTIA.
I
Oh,
wanted
sorry.
to kind of bring up. No, that's perfectly fine. I wanted to bring up a couple of things on the IC Square
Sure.
offering. So this new one that they have, this entry level cybersecurity, the CC.
Yeah.
So it's been probably I want to say maybe a year or so, but they do offer this course as a free course, as an entry level cybersecurity certification course. I think they do charge, maybe $25 or $30 for the
For the test.
textbook, right? But
Oh, for the book.
the stuff tied into this course is generally free. So, if there's individuals out there that are really looking at, like, where can I start building a certification base and the value associated with that, this is probably a great place to start. Because it gives you a broad framework of not only the just kind of the general standards associated with information security. So a little bit about NIST, a little bit about ISO, but it really focuses in on risk level components. So if you're entry level trying to figure out some programmatic components, take a look at this, and you can get it on the ISC Square ISC2.org website under this link, under the certification CC link. Um, so I've sent a few people over there to get that course, and they've been very, very happy with it. So
You don't happen to have a copy of the book, do you?
I do not have a copy of the book. I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. I didn't pick that one up. So
Okay.
Well, one other point I wanted to make on this, it's interesting from a certification standpoint. Back years ago, as you mentioned, the CISSP was pretty much it. It was the gold standard, but it was also pretty much, other than Microsoft, MCSE and certifications tied into that. The CISSP was pretty much the only main certification.
That's
And
correct.
most of the people, at least in my experience, that have come up through that CISSP ranks had highly technical skills. And as a result of that, I think what's happened is that employers or other folks, when they look at that, it's like, oh, I could pull anybody who's a CISSP and stick them in front of a firewall, and they're going to bang it out, or a server, they're going to bang it out in no
Right.
time at all. But that's not
Right.
really the case, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
Can you talk a little bit about that difference, Brian, and really what that CISSP is supposed to be?
Well, so in the earliest days, it was designed for DoD contractors. The Department of Defense had to have some way. They were mandated to have some way to to ensure that what they were doing met some standards, and there were none at that time. Remember, we're talking the 80s and 90s, where we're
Right,
still learning about security. That's another reason why there there was only a CISSP for the longest time, is because we were still learning all this stuff. This was all brand new. You got to understand, it's not like it is today where this stuff's been around for 20 years. This was brand spanking new stuff. The Orange Book had been invented in the early 80s. Um, we were still using Unix systems everywhere, which had incredible impenetrable security. And then all of a sudden, here came Microsoft Windows, which made everything really easy to do and really easy to tear apart. Really
right,
easy to tear apart. So the government required someone with a lot of really technical skills, because they didn't have people who were that they could ensure were qualified, that understood those Unix systems, that understood the Orange Book, that understood all that stuff. And so the CISP was it. There were no requirements for that in the industry at that time, in other places. It was only in the federal government. So unless you were working for the federal government, why would you bother with a CISSP? It didn't get you anything back then. Um, I think as the numbers increased, I still remember when there were only 1,000 CISSPs. A
wow, yes,
thousand. I have no idea what the number is today. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous worldwide, but there were only 1,000. I remember when you and I got our CCSP, or my other friend Tom, excuse me, got our CCSP certifications when we were in the 300s, in terms of the number of people who had those certifications out. Um, so I'm not sure if I got sidetracked or not in answering your question or not, Tom, but go ahead.
no, no,
Did
they
that,
go
did that
right
help?
on target with that, because I guess really it's about making sure that people understand that the CISSP is really about leadership and operations.
Yeah,
And one of the things it's been interesting for me is, when I look at not only that certification but some other certifications. And as you know, Brian, I was an adjunct faculty
right.
professor for about 7 or 8 years. And one of the things that I've always found interesting tied into that is that, you look at a degree or you look at a certification, and you do that, you build on that, but you also bring your own experiences and
Right,
background with that. And so,
right.
if you're a highly technical person and you're getting the CISSP as a benchmark or a baseline to move forward, you're going to have a lot higher technical slant than maybe somebody who comes at it from more of a security operations or programmatic
That's
standpoint.
true. That's true, and that's where the security management certifications have come into play, as uh, there's much more of a need for those kinds of individuals in the business today, because the functions of security have grown so much over the last 25 to 35 years. You've now got your security, your ISSMP, you got GRC for governance, risk, and compliance. There's all these other subspecialties that have crept out of that, and I think it's all a result of we've learned about security over the last 30 years. When I first started, we thought security was running network address translation on your firewall, because nobody knew how to get through that. We fooled them. We changed our IP address. Uh, today that's you know, a junior high kid can figure out how to hack through that stuff. So the whole universe has changed, and as a result of that, those subspecialties have grown in as the business of security has become more sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about ISACA, Information
Sure.
Systems Audit Control Association. I think is what it used to be.
Right.
They've gotten
Right.
away from that over the last several years, and now it's just ISACA with a really really nice logo.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Well, it covers so much more now. That's why.
yeah. Um, and so what I've done with this slide is I've basically pulled out all the I went up to their website and pulled up all their certifications and kind of listed them out here. They've got some new ones here, but you've got a
Hmm.
few certifications off of this list, Brian. Can you share with us
Yeah.
what that looks like for you?
Yes. Sure. So I have my CISA, my CISM, and my C-risk, and I actually co-authored the book on the CISA study guide for that Wiley published for a while. Excuse me. The Osaka certifications, I think, as I mentioned earlier, are much more about how to rather than about. So, for instance, in the security information security manager courseware certification and information needed to be a successful manager, you have to know a lot about project management. You have to know a lot about how to manage people because you've got, as a security manager, you have people working underneath you and you have projects that you're responsible for, and you have to have good processes in place to make sure that those programs are successful. And in the information security manager training materials, you learn how to do that, how to do that. Same thing with the CISA. When you learn how to do an information systems audit, you learn how to do it. What are the practical steps? You know, number one, you have a meeting. Number two, you decide what's important. Number three, who do I report to? Number four, how do you want the report written? You know, nuts and bolts kinds of things like that that you have to learn and that you're tested on when you take your exams. The the exams back in the day when was taking them were still paper based, where you had to wait. They only gave them twice a year. You had to wait until they gave one and travel to a site where they gave them and sit in a room for 3 hours, and they had all these security protocols in place, et cetera. Today, excuse me, computer based. You just simply go to a computer center and sit down and, excuse me again. Of course, they have cameras and security protocols, et cetera, but it's much different environment today. Um, the one difference I think I mentioned already that I pointed out to Tom earlier when we were looking at the training materials is the extent of expertise that are brought to bear on these training information materials is really incredible. We're talking 20 to 30 PhDs from around the world on each and every one of these training manuals and training programs. So they're very good at what they do, very, very good at what they do. So when you come out of an ISACA training, an information systems auditor course, for instance, you know how to do an audit. Whether you've done one or not, you have all the tools in front of you to actually go out and complete an information systems audit at a bank, at a healthcare facility, or whatever you want. The ISC squared certifications are a little bit different in that they're testing your knowledge base. Do you know how this is done? Do you know what a firewall is? Do you know what packet inspection is? Do you know what encryption is? Do you know the difference between encryption and this or that? Um, Whereas again, with the ISOC certifications, you come out with much more hands-on. It's a lot like the SAN certification. It's just at a much higher level. The SAN
Mhm.
certifications are meant to, here's a Palo Alto firewall, and here's how you take it apart. Here's how you write code and script for it. That's that kind of down in the weeds detail. Where the CISM, for instance, you know, you learn about several different um, uh, code development processes and how each of those work so that you can work inside any one of those that you might happen to work with, but you learn about all three versus again with the SAN stuff, you take a course on, you know, forensics. What's the software you use and how do you take apart a phone? It's just that simple. It's real down in the weeds, nuts and bolts kinds of stuff.
Sure.
Does that
Yep.
answer your question?
It
I
does absolutely.
got a little
Yeah.
sidetracked again, but
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. Well, one of the things that I've enjoyed about the ISACA cert, because I have a C risk, and I've looked at several other ones. Looked at the CISM,
Mhm,
and I went through the study guide. The CISA's I've gone through the study guide. But uh, one of the values that I got out of serving on the board for the Indiana chapter of ISACA was getting a good understanding of what it really takes to get through some of this material. And of course, Brian, you've been a mentor, frankly, for me for several years, and I certainly appreciate that. You shared a lot of knowledge with me about these different things and strategies behind taking these tests. But the CSXP, the cybersecurity practitioner, that's kind of an entry level, I think, kind of a test. And
mhm.
ISACA, I don't know if they still do it, but they had a course. We started a course and had an individual that taught it. We were really trying to get that baseline certification kind of spread out, across the base, the industry base.
Right.
Uh,
That's it. Another thing I forgot to mention is that early on in the business, there were no entry level certs. They were all senior level stuff. And the reason was because there wasn't any courseware developed for any of that. We didn't really know uh, what was entry level because we hadn't developed all of those subspecialties. And so today, what's in this that CSXP cybersecurity practitioner, that very well could have come directly from the CISSP book material, original material,
mm,
because what you're doing is you're taking a scaled down version of what used to be the master level certifications, and you're trying to get people who want to get into the business not have to wait for 5 years to be able to garner any kind of secure certifications and advanced trainings. You want to be able to get them in the door and get them moving fast and get them involved in the stuff. And I think that's great because it helps prepare them for those senior level certifications down the road. So, for instance, when I started, there was no entry level cybersecurity practitioner. There wasn't. There was a CISSP. So you had to have 5 years experience and really know your stuff to get a cert. That was brutal. It took me, I started my process in 2005 and I didn't get my certification until 2012.
wow.
Now,
Yeah.
I probably could have done it sooner than that, but I didn't feel confident in knowing the business and knowing how to study for those kinds of exams because I'd never taken an exam of that intensity before. And after I took that one, then I took another one, and I took another one, and I took another one, and I started becoming much more familiar with the process behind all that. And I had garnered that many more years experience. So when I took my CISSP, I had a minimum of 7 years experience, and I was still sweating bullets when I took that exam. I mean, I was sweating bullets the whole time.
I
So
had been in I'd been in the industry for several years, and it took me almost a whole year to get through that book,
yeah,
the
there's
Sean
a
Harris
lot of
book.
material.
Yeah,
Yep,
and get to
lot
the
of
point where I
material.
even felt like I could even make a pass at the test. And there's a lot more tools, a lot more resources out there today than what
Tons more,
there were several years ago. And I
tons
know
more.
some of the things, Brian, that you've shared with me in the past. I'm just kind of move to this next slide, to this
Sure.
CompTIA, because I know that there's a lot of fundamental courses that CompTIA has, but there's also some highly advanced courses, and I know that you've taught some of these courses. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. When I was the program chair at Ivy Tech Northeast Indiana for a number of years, we taught Network Plus, Security Plus. Cloud Plus just came out when I left the school. So there was no cloud security stuff. And then I also taught the Linux Plus exams, and I prepped students for those NA Plus, and I prepped them for those exams. The Tech Plus and the ITF didn't exist at that time, and pretty much everything on the right hand side, Server Plus, I believe, came out the year I left Ivy Tech. All the rest of those are brand new. Those None of those existed back when I was doing teaching stuff. But what I found was that in particular, the A Plus, Network Plus, Security Plus were all great, great foundational certifications for newbies coming into the business. There was enough material that you got exposed to everything I've mentioned so far, encryption, public key, private key infrastructure, I'm blanking on it, the network model on,
Like IP architecture.
yeah, all that stuff. And it was great foundational work because what happened, like for instance, in the Security Plus, everything in that course and everything in that certification book came directly from the CISSP training manual. It's just at a lower level. And so it's a great prep stuff. If you take the Security Plus course and the Security Plus exam, you're prepped for your 5 years experience. You're prepped to go get a job and work in security for 5 years to take your CISSP. No question about it. You can go toe to toe with any other junior person coming in on the train. Now, I would normally, to take Security Plus, you had to take Network Plus first, so you understood the foundations of what it was you're talking about, because everything is based on TCP/IP protocols. So you had to understand that fundamentally before you got into security. I wish we had had the Cloud Plus or Cloud Essential certifications and could have taught it back then. But we also taught Linux Plus real heavily because much of the world still runs on open source software. I was just talking with a very large retailer here in the Fort Wayne area the other day. They move 4,000 to 5,000 units a day out of their systems, and everything they run in the background is open source. It's all run on Linux.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
the entire thing.
that brings up a question. In a Windows world, right, where most systems, they're sitting out there, running some version of Windows. A lot of corporate environments, almost all corporate
Excuse me.
environments, I think, are running Windows based on,
Mhm.
various versions. But there's still some Linux things running around, and uh,
Lots,
you know,
lots.
what's your view on where people should balance? If I'm a just kind of getting into the market, what do I need to focus more on Windows, or should I zero in on Linux a little bit, or what's that
Yeah,
look?
my advice on that is you need to have fundamental Linux skills. So there's no question you need to take a course in Linux so that you understand it. But follow your passion. I have two former students who didn't who could they hated Windows. They would come to class with Linux running on their laptops. They just flat out wouldn't use it and learned to be Linux administrators and went to work for companies who ran Linux systems. One of them is a large cell phone provider, not a cell phone company, but they sell cell phones and services for Verizon around the state, the largest one in the state. Then they run Linux on everything in the background, always have. That's one of the competitive edges that a lot of companies have had over the years because they don't have to pay for licensing like they do with Microsoft. It's much cheaper to run Linux stuff because it's all open source. It doesn't cost them anything. They're not paying for they're not paying for Microsoft SQL licenses. They're not paying for Windows licenses. All of that stuff is free open source to run in MySQL on Red Hat or on Ubuntu or something like that. And so I say follow your passion. If nothing else, you have to take a Linux class. If you graduate with a degree in anything related to technology and you haven't taken a Linux class, shame on you. Shame on you. You have to understand it's one of the largest operating systems in the world. And if you don't know anything about it, shame on you. Don't come have a conversation with me. It's that simple.
Sure.
You need to understand the fundamentals.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this. So, in most corporate environments, it's, of course, they're obviously looking for professional individuals. Those folks maybe that have degrees or whatever. But if you're a high school kid, you're a senior. You had a business class or a couple of technology classes. If your school offers that. Uh, what is this list when I'm looking at this CompTIA list? Where does that where should somebody at that level start? And do you need a 4-year degree? Do you need a lot of certifications to kind of kind of get in and kind of feel your way around around the information security space?
So you don't, and if you're in high school, you need to start with ITF and Tech Plus. I mean, that's what those are, is entry level certifications to make sure that you have some basic skill level of stuff. If you're getting very advanced very quickly in high school, you're going to move right into Network Plus. Security Plus might be a bit to bite off for a high school student, depending on how advanced they are. Um, the other thing is high school is a great area for you to start experimenting with what you like, finding out about open source software, playing around with Windows, taking machines apart, putting them back together, that kind of stuff. So you get your hands you get your some hands-on experience working around those things. Trying to bite off anything more than that in high school is probably
Sure.
probably a lost cause. Um, and honestly, at a technical school, those are probably the certs for the guys and ladies who are going to wind up working in a computer shop somewhere, doing repair work, etc. They don't have a need to understand the advanced capabilities of TCP/IP or how public key infrastructure works. They're working on replacing hard drives. They're working on replacing video cards, doing diagnostic work, that kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but
And
if
those
that's
are
what
great entry level jobs, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those are great stepping stones for getting on to other things. It's a great idea for a high school student to get a job in a shop working so they begin to understand, how does a hard drive work? What is a file allocation table? How do those things work? And you learn that stuff with those introductory fundamental certifications.
yeah, and these larger companies, and there's a whole host around our geographical area, but there are these positions out there, I think, where people can, maybe a summer internship, you can get
Sure,
a job fixing, replacing video cards that have gone out,
sure.
or motherboards, or any of those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
I think those things are out there.
One of the things that we talked about, because I know we're starting to run out of time, that I wanted to make sure I put out here is we talked about the other day, which is, and this is just my own personal take on this. A lot of people have different ones, and that is, when I'm interviewing job applicants and I have a stack of resumes in front of me of people I don't know, I'm going to take the ones without certifications and put them on the bottom. Now, that doesn't mean that the ones I'm going to interview have the skill set to do the job, but it tells me that number one, they made the commitment of time and energy to learn what they needed to learn to pass that exam. That tells me a lot about their work ethic as well as their ability to do the job. The guys on the bottom or the ladies on the bottom, I don't know. You're rolling the dice. You don't know what it is you're getting. So when I see an applicant come in with a CCNA and Cisco routing, I know what that requires to get. It's not an easy certification. And I see another individual who claims to have the same level of expertise, but doesn't have that cert. The guy with the cert's going to get the interview every single time. So I
Hmm.
can't encourage young folks or other folks entering the workforce. I don't mean to be discriminatory in any way. Um, that that you really need to focus. These certs are important. They will not get you a job. They'll not guarantee that you know how to do the work, but they will elevate you to the status of at least you're going to get a job interview.
Right.
So I think
And
it's
also,
important.
it is, and I thought that's a great observation because, as a lot of these job systems, right, that you're uploading your resumes
Right,
to. I mean, that's all
right,
automated.
right.
And so, these employers,
AI is
are
doing it
parsing
all.
that stuff out for these certs.
They're looking at check boxes. Yep. And I will say this: I'm biased because I have those certs, and I have definitely noticed in the field that people who don't have those certifications, that's not important to them when they do interviews, and they make mistakes all the time because they wind up hiring people who don't have the expertise to do the job adequately, and then they wind up with all kinds of headaches.
Sure.
So,
Well, I know we are got just a few more minutes, and I think for next week's show we'll dive into the next two slides, which is I'll just kind of bring those up as just kind of more
Sure.
informational. So we can dive more into the CompTIA stuff and then talk more about SANS next week.
Okay.
But one of the things that I wanted to get your view on, Brian, was the implications of AI on some of the uh, on a lot of the jobs, in the information security space. Previously you could get an analyst. If you were an analyst, you could get a job, working at a SOC or something along
Right.
those lines, where you're getting feeds right from a SIM or something along those lines,
Right.
security information event manager, and you're analyzing that data. But the trend now is to take that and feed it into AI and see what kind of spits out. And so, what are your thoughts on the impact of that?
Maybe maybe we should ask ChatGPT and see what it spits out at us. I don't really know, Tom. That is such a wild card that someone will come up with a certification on. I guarantee you that.
Oh
Someone
yeah,
will come up with a
yeah.
certification. I'm just not sure who and when and where, but I think it's much like um, I'm going to make a prediction. It's much like security was in that we started with the fundamentals and we built on it. And over the years, all of these subspecialties have arisen. And I suspect the same thing will happen with AI. Just to give you an example, I won't mention who or where so I don't get anybody in any trouble, but I can tell you firsthand, not hearsay, but firsthand, that there are healthcare institutions using AI now to actively listen in on and transcribe patient visits. So when the physician sees you, they come in and you sit down, they don't have to sit at the keyboard anymore and type while they're talking to you. They just simply hit a record button, and the artificial intelligence unit records that entire session, both video and audio, transcribes it, and then spits it out for the clinician to do any editing, checking, et cetera. And they just hit accept, and boom, the session's done. That will absolutely revolutionize healthcare because now you're moving the physician back to looking at you, the patient, and paying attention to you, and not having to pay attention with charting without looking at medication problems, et cetera. Can just simply ask AI a question, and it will answer it in the background, things like that. So you're going to see subspecialties in healthcare. You're going to see it in manufacturing. You're going to say, an engineer will say to the chat GPT model, for instance, do you think we should use metric or SAE standards on this model? And see what it spits out at you. All kinds of wild subspecialties like that. Ones I haven't even thought about. You may have an ambulance driver with a critical patient in the back end asking AI, how much of atropine should I be giving at this point in time based on the patient's temperature, all the sensors they have plugged into it, where you actually get better healthcare as a result. So I see a lot of subspecialties growing out of this, but it's going to take years for that to come to maturity if it doesn't kill us all in the meantime and take over the
Sure,
universe.
sure. And there's a lot of, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree 100%. But there are a lot of controls, security
Mhm.
controls that need to be in place, or that can be in place, should be in place, and in
Ones we haven't
organizations
even
that are
thought of. Ones we haven't even thought of yet. There'll be
exactly,
ones
yeah,
that we
right,
we
right.
haven't even considered yet. Yeah,
And so organizations that are working through AI models responsibly, they're following a protocol, even though it's early on.
right.
Some of the larger shops, Google, Microsoft, they are developing standards, and I think there's a few organizations out there that have standards. I know ISO's got something out on developing responsible AI models, and so
Right.
it's out there. It's early, but I think that's right on target for sure.
There's also the question of, so here's an example. So the AI model listens during a clinical session and says, I don't think this patient is appropriate for this medication. And the doctor says, I'm sorry, but I'm the physician and I think that this is the appropriate medication. Who wins that argument? Because the AI is going to be delivering this stuff to the insurance company
That's a great
as
point.
well. Yeah, so who's going to argue with that? I was watching just last night. I was watching. I think it's a movie from like 2012 or something called Stealth, and it's the story about a super aircraft fighter that runs off of AI, and they lose control of it at one point during the movie, and then they miraculously convince it, and at the very end, it develops a conscience, and it sacrifices itself to save two humans, which is kind of an interesting twist. But that movie was back in 2012. Okay, that's 12 years later now, and that movie is still very relevant. What happens when we get those drones to where they're so sophisticated that we lose control of them and they start making decisions on their own? That's a
Yeah.
scary thought. Scary
It,
thought. So I think AI will develop into many, many subspecialties. I really do. And the security in each of those will have challenges of its own.
okay. Well, uh,
There's
great points, Brian. With that, I think we're at time, and so I'll go ahead and kind of close this out. So, thanks everybody for tuning in to Passion and Hard Work, where we're really working to empower the cybersecurity professionals by sharing actionable insights, professional experiences, and career growth strategies. If you found the information today insightful and valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions about cybersecurity career growth or strategies, please ask them in the comments below, and we'll work to answer them as we bring on new shows. So appreciate your time, Brian. Any last words?
Nope.